Hi, this is Rich.
Okay, and today is the fifth limb of the eight-limb path of the Yoga Sutras, Patanjali's Yoga Sutras. And it's the second chapter, 54th sutra. And Rob is going to chant for us.
Svavisaya samprayoga chittasya svarupanukkara evandriyanam pratyaharaha.
Alright, thanks, Rob. Okay, so Pratyahara is, as it were, the imitation by the senses of the mind by withdrawing of them from their respective objects. So basically the quelling or the silencing of the senses, right? We can think of this as turning all our sensory input on off, like flipping a switch, turning it off. And it said that pranayama, the limb just before pratyahara, pranayama, the side effect of pranayama, of deep pranayama, is this pratyahara, right? So we can think of this is like the between point from outer, like the asanas, right, of the sutras before, to inner, right? So we're going from outer to inner, and so we're starting to turn within. You want to say something about that, Rob?
Well, if we move specifically back to this sutra, so we have one's mind, chitta, that's trying to not come into contact with one's objects. And what are the objects? Those are the objects of the senses. So if we're orienting the mind to not come into contact with the objects of the senses, sight, hearing, taste, etc., Pratyahara is basically the withdrawal of the mind from the objects of the senses. Cutting off, as Rich says, from orienting toward what sense data is coming in, what I'm seeing with my eyes, what I'm smelling with my nose, what I'm tasting with my mouth. That still might come in, but as long as your mind is not oriented in that direction, you're basically practicing pratyahara. And as he said, it's one of the side effects of pranayama, or deep pranayama, one of the side effects, of which there are others, of course. But yeah, pratyahara is the beginning of the internal orientation, as opposed to, well, not as opposed, but in direct logical fashion or order from the outer social ethics of the yamas, the restraints, or how we take care of ourselves with the niyamas, how asana perfects the body or the temple or the container of our senses, our mind, etc., to pranayama, which is basically, that's almost like the first layer of orienting ourselves within, because it purifies our mind and starts creating the uncovering of the layers of the mind that have dulled our full capacity up to this point. And now, when we're imitating that which is within, it's already within, that so-called enlightened state. The state of yoga, yoga chitta vritti nirodha, not orienting toward the mind senses, which is the second sutra, if you recall. But so what's already there is that kind of yogic state that's covered up by these layers, samskaras, kleshas, all of that. And once we start withdrawing ourselves from the senses, I mean, those are part of the onion layers that keep us from realizing the state of yoga, is because we're so oriented toward what we see, you know, our loved one, the one that we like, what we hear, good music, whatever it is.
Touching, tasting.
What we touch, taste, all those things. Yeah. It distracts us from actually orienting toward what's already there. It's not like we're cultivating to make what's already there and come about. It's already there. We just have to kind of peel away the layers. Some people do that quicker. Some people, perhaps like myself, not so quick. But regardless of that, we're still orienting toward uncovering that layer and withdrawing the senses. So pratyahara is a natural progression from those first four limbs, so to speak.
Right. So the literal term, so prati, it means opposite direction, right? So, and then hara means what is ingested. So what is ingested is not coming in, it's actually allowed to go out, right? So it's kind of like it's deflecting the ingestion. You can think of the ingested might be the senses, right? So it's not allowing the ingestion of the senses to occur. I thought that was an interesting description, and that came from
Nikolai Bachman. Yeah.
Nikolai Bachman, yeah. And that's a interesting look at Pratyahara.
Because we ingest all of this stuff all the time. We're, I mean, all the sense data that's coming in, we have to ingest it because we live our everyday lives. You have to ingest the sights when you're driving on the road, otherwise you'll get in an accident. Mm-hmm. And you have to process that ingestion. You know, various things. You hear something that sounds very beautiful, and you ingest that, and you get inspired by it, like a song or a bird or whatever it is.
I think all through school we're taught to ingest, right?
Yeah.
We're taught constantly.
Education, ingest, ingest. And what's so interesting is that later on in life, we find that a lot of that we ingested was not necessarily good for our digestion,
yeah.
so to speak. So in